Welcome to Black Widow. Some time ago, Ron Waterman, known as the Ozark Sportsman, whose television programs air on several different television stations, came down to do a tour of the shop, and after seeing it, we thought it'd be real good to make it available to Black Widow customers and prospective customers. The first part of it deals with a tour of the shop and seeing Black Widow bows being handcrafted, custom made. The second part of it deals with a lot of the information that's in our owner's manual of setting the bow up, tuning the bow, bare shaft testing, instinctive shooting. And we hope that you not only enjoy it, but find it valuable, and that it gives you an even better appreciation of what goes into building a custom-made recurve bow.
Ron's a sportsman, the Ozark sportsman. You'll find him in the woods and on the streams, never wishing he's a hunting and fishing. You'll always find him living out his dreams from north to south and east to west. Those Ozark sportsmen can stand the test. So gather around, come sit right down, turn up the TV, take off that frown, forget your troubles, live out your dreams. With the Ozark sportsman, Ron's on the screen.
Okay, Dan, look forward to it. Get this on its way. Thanks a lot. How you doing?
Okay, the Ozark sportsman in person. Been about, what, 3 years, 3.5 years?
About 3.5 years, I believe, Ron.
Ken Beck joins us now from the Black Widow Bow Company, and Ken, like we kind of mentioned there, we've been here 3.5 years ago, something like that, and did a little segment, and a lot of people liked it and want to come back and pick your brain again if we can. So I'm reading all these articles that recurves are more and more popular every year, and I want you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, it's, of course, a pleasant surprise to us to see the amount of interest in returning to traditional archery, longbows and recurves. We make just recurves. And that's all we've made since 1957, when Black Widow was started and founded by the Wilson brothers, who were good archers and good bowyers. I've owned the company about 8.5 years now, and we've seen a big increase in interest in traditional type of archery and shooting, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I noticed you got some bows lined up here a little bit. What do you got up here on top? That looks like, I've saw that one before, I think.
Well, Ron, these are, knew you were coming, so I got a few of the old classics, Black Widow classics. And of course, this is one of the old original 1957 vintage Black Widow bows. That's the one the Wilson brothers started building in 1957, and through the years came out with a lot of different models. These are just a few of them, and some of the more classic models that were made through the years, beautiful pieces of work and art. Then about 17, 18 years ago, why takedown bows came into being, and this is one that they came out with. They called HF 1225, and a lot of those have been hunted with all over the world. And then when I bought the business, we went back to wood.
Yeah.
And today people like the beauty and the warmth and the tradition of wood, and so we came out with what we call the Silver Anniversary Model MA about 8 years ago, and evolved from that, and we're making some bows now that are very similar to this. This is a Diamond Anniversary bow that we made a limited number of and sold a limited number of, no longer available in production, but this was an anniversary bow that we were real proud of when we built it. And those are some of the bows, some of the models that we're building now. I think we make about 7 different models of hunting bows, and several limb lengths of those bows, and a combination then probably, including limb length and models, about 24 versions of those bows.
When a person buys a recurve or a longbow, it's more of a marriage type situation. They wind up with names, don't they?
Well, yeah, you know, there's a certain amount of romance, I think, that goes with shooting stick bows, and a bow becomes a companion to the people that really enjoy shooting traditional type of equipment. And that's part of the fun of building it for them.
Yeah. What's some of the, maybe a mistake somebody will make or want to know about switching over from a compound, and we're not trying to put compounds that had recurves or anything like that, but you have to get a lighter weight, right, in a recurve?
Well, that's right. The biggest mistake people make, and I spend more time on the telephone than anything else trying to talk people down into a reasonable bow weight, because these bows are very high-performance bows and will shoot as hard and as fast as a lot of the medium quality round wheel compounds, pound per pound. But that's a trick answer, because you shouldn't try to shoot the poundage with a recurve that you're able to shoot with a compound where you have 50, 65% let off at full draw. You're going to be holding it all at full draw. So I recommend people, if they're shooting a 65-pound compound, that they drop down maybe to a 55-pound recurve at their draw. And you also find you're going to have a little shorter draw with a recurve, because on the compound, when you hit relaxation, you just stretch out more. And that recurve where you're holding it off, you're more compressed in the shoulder structure. And so your draw is going to be a little shorter. And you're wiser to, after you've shot that bow a while and you've developed those back muscles that it takes to shoot a recurve versus the arm muscles to pull a compound over peak weight, after you've shot it a while, you ought to be saying to yourself, gee, I wish I'd ordered a bow 5 pounds heavier. If that's the case, that means you're shooting it well, and you're able to shoot it 2-3 hours and enjoy it. On the other hand, if you're fighting that thing, man, I wish it were 5 pounds lighter, that's bad, because then you aren't shooting it as well as you should be and not enjoying it as much as you should enjoy it. And, you know, it's accuracy that does the job, whether you're bow hunting or target shooting or whatever. Accuracy is much more important than poundage. And so you need to shoot what you can shoot accurately.
Yeah. So if a person goes over his weight limit and he's out here in a tree stand and a deer comes by and he's got all they can muscle to pull it, he's going to have a lot more problems hitting where he should.
Yeah, sometimes people forget, you know. They come down here in the middle of July and we go outside and we shoot some bows and they say, yeah, I believe I can handle this. What they forget is next November, they've climbed up into that tree stand before daylight and they've sat there motionless for 2-3 hours, and those old muscles are tight and they're cold, and a 10-pointer comes along and those muscles are not nearly as strong as they're going to be out here on a warm day in the sunshine. Plus, if he's where I want him to be, and that's right there, not out there 40 yards, I want him right there, you're not as strong down here as you are up here. So you have to remember that also.
Now, I haven't had the opportunity to hunt in a lot of mountain states, but now, like on your compounds, don't they give you more problems in real cold weather than where a recurve you're not going to have that?
Well, certainly a recurve is a much simpler piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And whether it's an automobile or a bow, simplicity has advantages usually as far as problems and this type of thing, yeah.
Now, going back to an article I read here, a few weeks ago, the bowyers of making recurves, you have to spend it's a lot more personal to a bow, I mean, fitting people with it, isn't it? And don't you have to stay on the phone a lot and answer a lot of questions?
Spend a lot of time on the phone, yeah, because, you know, you don't adjust the draw weight or the draw length, so you have to build that limb and put the right amount of material in that limb that's going to give them the weight that they are comfortable with at the draw they're comfortable with. So it's, you know, you can't go to town and buy a pair of shoes for somebody else, usually, right?
Yeah.
You're going to go to town and try them on. Well, you need to build a recurve bow for the person, just like you'd buy a pair of shoes for the person.
A lot more labor goes into a recurve or a long bow. We're kind of talking about old tradition than goes into a compound, right?
Well,
more assembly line on your compound, which is nothing wrong with that, but
the nice thing about compounds, they tend to lend themselves to mass production, and consequently, compounds are a good value, because since the advent of compounds, the quality has really gone up, and yet the price has not gone up all that much. So you get a good bargain for your money with a compound today, primarily because they can mass produce them with the minimum amount of hand work and labor. Recurve, on the other hand, particularly the way most custom bowyers build them, the way we build them, involves a lot of hand work, and no one has designed a machine to tiller that limb to get it to draw just right. And then, of course, we put a lot of little extras into it that takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of hours invested in one of these bows, a lot of hours.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the wood that you're putting in your bows this day. Why don't you kick it off with that?
Well, on our popular bows, model MA3 autumn oak, as you see here, or the gray version of it, we call it the MA2 gray bark. We're using Eastern Hard Rock laminated maple. That's 1/16 inch stacked veneers. That's impregnated with color, in this case tan, under pressure before those are all glued up into a chunk, into a block. And then we're using a red stripe of birch here, and on each side of that birch is fiberglass that adds a lot of reinforcement and strength to the handle. We face the handle where the limb mounts to it with fiberglass to protect from moisture. The limb is faced and backed with clear, natural unidirectional fiberglass that is clear so that after you paint it you can see through it and see the wood limb core, and it adds a look of beauty to it. I was counting the other day of all of the various pieces of wood in that bow right there. There are 360 individual pieces of wood and 26 individual pieces of fiberglass on the handle and the limb, tip over blades, and so forth. So there's a lot that goes into building a bow like this.
I'll tell you what, just a bow like that, just to hang it on the wall, it just is beautiful to look at, especially whoever did your arrows. I mean, that's beautiful. That really is.
That's part of the romance, I think, of shooting recurve bows.
Let's get into a little bit about building them, and why don't you kind of take us through? I'll volunteer my services to hold this beauty here. That's really a beautiful bow, but why don't you take everybody, just kind of tell them how you start out getting the wood in and how you build a recurve.
Okay. Let's go out to the shop, Ron, and I'll show you some of the woods and how we try to build these bows.
All righty.
Ron, the wood we get in is just in blocks and chunks. These are some handle blanks that we've already sawed and profiled, and Wendell has used the pattern to mark the V on these handle blanks and is ready to saw out the V. Eventually, the position of these two pieces will be reversed when the handle is glued together. Also, the trim stripe, which is reinforced with fiberglass, will be glued between these two pieces. Next, he locks the V section onto a profile jig to sand a squared straight edge that will give each limb a 7.5-degree limb angle. We use airlock jigs to lock our limbs in so that we can drill the holes that we use for mounting the limbs in perfect alignment, and also the handle section. Jimmy, why don't you come over and drill a handle for him, if you would.
But pretty precise, right?
We run very, very close tolerances. With this method of drilling, we are able to get those 6 holes for a takedown bow, 2 little stud pins that keeps the limb in alignment on each limb, and then the main hole for the limb bolt insert, and those consequently are lined up in perfect alignment. You can take any limbs off of any bow and put on another handle, and you have good limb alignment.
Do you get a lot of interesting stories and photographs of people, the hunts they've had with your bows?
Yeah,
I would think you would.
That's one of the fun things we enjoy, is getting the mail and opening up letters and seeing some nice animals taken with the black-widow bows. Right. After the handle section has been drilled, knurled brass inserts with a head on them are pressed in from the back side and glued with epoxy. Later, the handle sections will be glued together, and this insert will be completely hidden. This is a piece of the center section that goes in between for decorative as well as functional, in that it adds a lot of strength to the handle of that section. That's faced with about 100 thousandths of fiberglass on each side. Put that over your knee, Ron, and bend that. If you can break it, I'll give you a new bow.
Don't look like I'm going to get a bow, man.
This is a handle section that's been drilled and the insert put in from this side and countersunk. It has a head on it, and it's countersunk and glued in. And then This eventually will have a trim strike put in it and butt blocks put on. The limb eventually then will be mounted there.
Okay. There's a lot of different steps too making a bow, isn't there?
We document on paper about 400 steps that we have to remember to do to build one of these takedown bows. Yeah. John has the handle components glued and assembled and is torquing down the clamps. He has it about ready to go into the oven. As you can see, this is a very intricate and complex handle to build and takes a lot of time.
What type of glue do you use on these?
We're using all epoxies that's mixed by weight. Cures, the handles we cure at 120 degrees and the limbs we cure at 180 degrees for about 2 hours.
Do you think we could get Bill to give us that demonstration he did before where he stands on that limb and you think...
Yeah, we'll find Bill, get him to do that quick here. Wendell's put a pattern on there ready to start sawing. That's a noisy old saw. Makes a lot of noise. That wood is tough to saw. We use a Remington blade and boy, it's hard on saw blades to saw that stuff, I'll tell you.
One has to saw through the glue and the fiberglass and everything, right?
Yeah, you just got opposite types of material glued together to try to saw. That's what it looks like when Wendell's all done sawing. Then there's a lot more work to be done to it yet. Okay.
What's up next?
This is where we keep our riser sections. We've got one-piece bow riser sections and also then various riser sections for the takedown bows, depending on what model. These are profiled out real thin, then Jimmy goes over there and just feathers those out where you can almost see through them. It takes a steady hand and a delicate touch and a lot of patience to do that.
Let's see that just a second again. That's really easier to see on this piece of all the layers that's in here than it is really on the finished product in there. Look at those layers.
Yeah, there's about 30 layers there, Ron.
Now, is this the autumn oak color here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And where's your gray bark? You have a gray bark one in there?
Oh, there's a gray bark there.
These are your two most popular colors in the bow.
Right.
Yeah, there's the difference.
Make sure I put those back in the right stack. We may want to edit that and make sure. Jimmy double checks the thickness of the limb materials because that is what will, for the most part, determine the draw weight. He also has to be very careful to weigh and mix the glue properly. Jimmy has the materials all laid out here. The limb will be faced with clear unidirectional fiberglass. He's using 2 matched pairs of autumn oak tapered laminations reinforced with a woven glass center core. He rolls glue on all surfaces to ensure there won't be any dry spots. Then he lays up the materials in the form, taps them with 3 special stainless steel strips that will disperse the pressure of the 30 clamps that he positions and pins. He's getting ready to put a set of limbs, takedown limbs, in the oven. He's got everything in place and glue rolled on all surfaces and putting the torque wrench to the clamp so that we get just the right amount of pressure everywhere on that limb that we need to get a super strong glue line. Got it ready to go in the oven, Jimmy?
Good. Now tell me a little bit about this oven process here.
Well, he's going to put that form in a 180-degree oven and let it cure the epoxy for about 2 hours at 180 degrees. That helps ensure that on a hot day out here in the sun in the middle of July when the temperature's in 110, 15 degrees out there, that limb won't come apart.
Okay. Let's see what's up next down this way.
After the limbs come out of the form, Wendell profiles the center riser section to a width that will fit into the drill jig. Next, he removes the rough excess glue from the rest of the limb. Since all takedown limbs, regardless of their length, are laid up in the same form, it's necessary to use different lengths of riser sections. Here, Wendell uses a riser gauge to mark that riser section according to the length of those particular limbs. Then he squares the marks and saws out the center section, the excess amount. Later, the butt end of the limbs will be sanded square on a butt sander. Then he airlocks the limbs in this drill jig and drills all 3 holes in perfect alignment, matching the holes that were drilled in each handle. Let's go over here. Toby's busy profiling a handle to an exact shape that will have our standard medium grip on it. These have already been profiled what we call horizontally. He's in the process of doing a vertical profile with the handle and the limbs that's going to match to it, and consequently we end up with a perfectly matched limb to the handle. We keep close tolerances about plus or minus 5 thousandths, so that again any handle will go on any limb and fit very, very well. Okay. Why don't you show them how you do that, would you please? We've found that this method is the most accurate and most reliable way to achieve close tolerances and a perfect fit of the limb to the handle. Gets done with the 24 grit, he's going to move over to another sander there on the 100 grit and take off another 30 thousandths, and as a result then end up with a pretty smooth finish at that point. There'll be a lot more sanding done on it later, but he ends up then with 2 profiles done, and at that point we've had a marriage, a handle and a set of limbs, and this limb, for instance, is a MA 362-inch, serial number 9067. We're going to put a custom low-wrist grip on it. Every one of these is made for a specific customer. It's supposed to make a certain number of pounds draw weight at a certain draw length. Toby then uses a micrometer and records 8 different measurements on each handle. If a customer orders just a set of limbs later, we like for him to give us the serial number of the original handle so we can check these records and get an excellent fit on his new limbs too. The style of this handle is what we call a double horn design. Here it's been mounted in a jig and the angles of the horns are being profiled. Next he routes out the low radius shelf that helps to make a good arrow flight possible for those who prefer shooting off the shelf.
You do a lot of special orders like that on the wrist and things like that. You get a lot of requests for.
Do quite a few custom grips, yes.
Is that difficult to do? I mean, if somebody lives, say, out in the West or something, is that hard to?
Well, the way we prefer to do it is to have them send us a handle or bow or grip that they like real well and want us to reproduce it, and we can do a pretty good job of copying that grip then, so that they end up with what they want. If you just do a drawing, it's hard to get it the way they want it.
Yeah. What's up next on our tour?
Well, come on around here.
This is very interesting. Like I said, I've been here before, but it's still interesting.
After Toby finishes the shelf, Jim Bob marks guidelines on the handle that will help him as he shapes out the grip. First, he bevels the entrance to the sight window, which will help the arrow fletching to pass through the window smoothly. Then he uses the guidelines as he carves out the third dimension of the grip. This takes an eye of a sculptor to get the shape just right. Roger's working on shaping a handle there. We use 60 grit, 120 grit, 180 grit, and just keep, I call it eroding, just gradually eroding the scratches out of that handle and gradually eroding the shape into it. And it's a rather time-consuming process. Jim Bob is using a smaller spindle to get into the throat area of the grip. Here again he uses several different sanding grits and different air pressures in the spindle to get the smooth, rounded finish he wants. This is another set. We call them a set. Every week Jimmy glues up a set of limbs, and each one for a customer, of course. And then the next week a certain number of things are done to that set of bows. And each week they're moved along. We keep 5 sets in production at all times, which means it takes us 5 weeks from the time we start to run them through production. And this set here we're involved in putting the shape into the grip using these air-filled spindle sanders to work it down and shape it and smooth it. This is a custom grip there that you can see, Ron, that we're doing for a gentleman that wanted some finger grooves in it and a high wrist. And he sent us a bow for us to copy to get this done the way he wanted it. Let's get back to the limbs. A heavy limb is thicker than a limb of a lighter draw weight, of course, so the butt end is beveled to match the thickness of the handle butts. For protection in wet weather, the inside of the stud pin holes, as well as the larger hole that will later accept the brass limb insert, is carefully sealed. After the bow is assembled, Roger finds and marks the center of the limb so that everything that follows is oriented from the limb center. Long strips of tip overlays have already been glued up, and now John is profiling the bevel and will later cut them in 1 3/4 inch lengths. Roger uses the center mark he put on the limb earlier to locate this pattern that he's using to draw the guidelines that Bill will go by later when he saws out the limb taper. Again, he relies on the center mark to locate the overlay that reinforces the limb tip. A special adhesive is applied before clamping it down on the limb with the proper amount of pressure to get a good, strong glue bond.
What have we got up now? Have you got my bow made yet?
Yeah, well, we can get started. Now, Bill saws out the limb taper, being careful, of course, to stay outside the guidelines. This handle's all been shaped out, and the limb has been center marked and pattern put on it, tip overlay reinforcements glued on, and just rough sawed out. And Bill's, at this point, is ready to start grinding that limb down and putting a tiller into it. Bill, by the way, is our general manager. He started working with Black Widow Bow and the Wilson Brothers when he was a kid, and he's truly a master bowyer. Bill, why don't you show him how you grind that limb down?
If you have a good year, how many bows can you manufacture?
Oh, our production is geared to limb production, and we're building about 800-900 sets of limbs a year. We sell limbs only too sometimes. Fellow orders a bow and an extra set of limbs.
So there's not really a way that you could speed up the process on these bows, is there?
Not very easily, no, because these gentlemen are all very good at what they do, and they didn't learn to do it overnight.
Yeah. I mean, the only way that you could manufacture more bows is have more people and more machines, wouldn't that be?
And more headaches.
Yeah.
And less time to go hunting, Ron.
Excuse me here, I'll step out of the way. Now what process do we go through here?
After Bill's done the first grind, he checks the width at a given distance down from the tip of each limb before he takes any more material off. In order to build a narrow, high-performance limb, Bill has to be very precise and very careful as he narrows the limb taper. It's much easier and faster, of course, to build a wide limb, but it just won't perform as well. Because our limbs are narrow, that also means they have to be thicker and therefore won't twist as easy as some very wide but very thin limbs.
We're drawing on it.
Okay.
What about your service after you sell policy?
Oh, we spend a lot of time on the phone talking with people that are having aero flight problems. And if they followed our suggestions in the owner's manual, then we can mentally follow along and many times help them solve their problem. And of course, the bows have a 4-year prorated warranty and full coverage for 6 months. And we keep some bows around, limbs around, that we try to loan people. If they have a problem, particularly during hunting season, we can keep them in business. Bill makes that job look real easy, but it's not. And after he gets his tillering clamps on there, he's going to draw it, see which way that limb wants to twist, because it's going to want to twist one way or the other. Theoretically, you could make that limb symmetrically perfect, but the orientation of the fibers and the materials is going to cause that limb to want to twist. That's why you can't make a machine